From an economic standpoint, if you were to look at all this activity, this innovation and this engineering feats and marvels, our ancestors had nailed it beautifully in Bharatavarsha. The whole idea was to have, if you were to look at these temples and if you were to look at our society as it existed at that point in time, every village would have a Grama Devata. And that temple would have these annual events, monthly events, Jatre, Rathotsava, what have you. The whole idea was to get people to come in. And if you were to look at the ways many of these, or rather most of our temples are designed, the main road leading to the temple Gopura would both be lined with shops. And traders would come in there, sell their wares. You look at Hampi, long path. Same, Nanjundeshwara temple, Shrikanteshwara temple in Nanjangud. You look at any temple, you will see this path leading to the main Gopura would be flanked on either side with shops and people, local traders from other villages coming in there and selling their goods. And then the temple itself would have an ecosystem. It would have a Gurukula, people would come in there, stay there. The whole activity centered around the temple, would all contribute to the local economy. And the tasks and duties would also be defined and distributed accordingly. So there would be the local florist who would supply flowers. The local the agriculturist would supply rice for Annadana. Everything would be thought through, and it would all be about getting the local community together and contributing to economic activity. So basically a system that existed beautifully. How did it go down over time? Again, if you were to look at global GDP and economic activity, 2000 years ago, Indian economy was about 35-36% of global GDP activity. All of global, 35% of global economic activity was out of Bharatavarsha. 100 years ago, when the Mughals, maybe a little later, it was still about 27-28. Then the British came in 24-25. 180-200 years, down to 2-3-4%. That was India's share of global GDP. So effectively what the British did, they obviously destroyed our industry. We all have read in our social studies that they chopped off the thumbs of muslin weavers. They not only did that, they achieved it through taxation and by destroying our education system. We had a parampara-driven, tradition-driven system. They destroyed it by bringing in caste into it. And then, of course, today, we've kind of revived. We are still now looking up the curve, 7-8% of global economic activity. They also, in the process, in the bargain, besides destroying our industry, they also took away our self-esteem. And that explains the reason why 75 years, if you were to look back at 70 years and look back at the way economic activity was carried out, it was license Raj, it was Nehruvian economics, where artificial scarcities were created. It is only now, over the last 5, 7, 8 years, that we see a revival in innovation and entrepreneurial activity in the country. And then enough has been talked about demographic dividend, 65-70% of our population being younger than 35%, and that India would lead the world, all that. The real challenge though, and then of course, every time there are numbers, GDP growth figures that are talked about, and you have major debates on whether 6%, 7% is good bad. And then they compare it with what was achieved in 2017, and then they say that it has dipped. The real thing about GDP growth is so long as the real growth of your GDP is positive, 5-6%. The challenge for economic planners is always to make sure that the economic growth is balanced on one hand, which means it encompasses all sectors of the economy. The agricultural sector, the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary sectors. And it is inclusive, which means it touches upon every section of society, and that it is sustainable. For most economic planners, I mean, if you were to talk to, of course, it's a cliched thing, if you have 5 economists, there will be 6 opinions and what have you. But the real thing is you don't want the economy getting overheated, because sudden spurts in growth and then there will always be a recession, and that is not what is desirable. So long as you hit the 6-7% consistently and it is a gradual curve, you're doing good. So right now, if you were to look at of course, COVID was a bit of an aberration, but if you were to ignore that, we are 6-7%, which is extremely healthy. And we don't have to be apologetic to quote-unquote leftists when they talk about growth falling.